Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Mondays at Noon. I'm Professor Gerhard Barone. I'm one of the accounting professors here at Gonzaga, and Mondays at Noon is our weekly forum where we gather as a community to talk about topics that are important to us as a business school. And today we're talking about accounting, a major with countless opportunities. I hope you caught that pun there on the accounting part and the countless part. We have a wonderful panel of speakers for you today. I think the last thing that we all want is for this to be another Zoom lecture to you. So I just want to remind the students here that, that this is for you. And even though I have a number of questions that I can ask our panelists today, I'm sure you, in your sort of deciphering whether accounting is the major for you, is the career choice for you, I'm sure you have some questions, and I think it would be best, you would be best served if you were able to ask those questions. So please use the chat function, you know, down at the bottom of your screen there. Also, feel free to raise your hand. I'll have the participants list up, and I'll keep running through that if you're comfortable enough to ask your questions sort of live virtually. So please do that, especially if you have something that you would like to ask and like to have answered by our panelists today. So to kick things off, I think I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and maybe talk a little bit about their current position and maybe their career progression. And then a little bit, maybe if it's not obvious, about how you use accounting in your current role right now. So I'm just going to go down the list as it's sort of been presented in terms of the marketing of this event. So let's start out with Jenn at Zillow. So why don't you take it over, Jenn?
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Thanks for having me today. I am super excited to be here. Wish I could be there in person, but hopefully we can do this again next year and it will be live, fingers crossed. I am currently the Chief Accounting Officer at Zillow out of Seattle. And I've, been at Zillow now for what's coming up on almost 10 years, which is just crazy to me. I won't even tell you what year I graduated Gonzaga because it was making me feel old trying to do the math. But I graduated from Gonzaga, and fortunately, I feel like anyone who chooses an accounting major at Gonzaga, you've already made a great choice, because I feel like the professors and the community is already really well set between the public accounting firms and Gonzaga. And so I felt really lucky to have that kind of natural progression into public accounting right out of Gonzaga. Already had my first job lined up at KPMG in Seattle. I spent about 8 or so years at KPMG and worked on a couple of really great clients. Alaska Airlines was one of my biggest clients. And then I got really lucky in that I worked on an IPO at KPMG at a time where it was a pretty quiet IPO market. And fortunately, at the time, Zillow was looking for someone with IPO experience. There weren't a lot of us. And so, you know, in addition to, of course, working hard, I feel like I've also had a lot of great kind of lucky streaks and good opportunities as a result. But anyway, got hired to work at Zillow. At the time, I think there were about 200 employees. Now there's more than 5,000. It's grown tremendously. And obviously leading the accounting team there, I deal with accounting every day, a combination of accounting strategy. I deal with a lot of technical accounting topics. I oversee the team that closes the books on a monthly basis. So it's kind of it's a broad use of my accounting skills. But I was prepping for this, thinking about how when I was probably in many of your shoes, which doesn't seem like very long ago, but I realized it was a long time ago. And I remember when I was a sophomore and I was feeling that pressure of having to decide on a major. And I just remember meeting with one of my favorite accounting professors and having that conversation about how it really does provide, I'll steal the pun, but countless opportunities. And I really just feel like if you have a business, a passion for business, accounting is a great place to start because you can take it so many places. So anyway, so glad to be here today. And again, hope to meet many of you in person one of these days.
Great, thanks, Jen. Mark, you want to introduce yourself? Take a minute.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Yeah, my name's Mark Spink. I'm a class of, sorry, Jen, 2001. I'll say it. It's coming on a long time now. But yeah, I have 2 degrees from Gonzaga. Proud of my time there. So I had a accounting degree, and also at the time was what we would have called a MIS degree, or Management Information Systems degree, and left Gonzaga, went to work for Ernst & Young for a couple, 3 years, transferred firms. Went to work for PwC for about 5 more. Enjoyed my time there. It's a lot of work. You see a tremendous breadth, I think to Jen's point, a tremendous breadth of different industries and different experiences. Then I jumped ship out of that, had some kids, decided those hours weren't right for me, and then moved into the private side where I worked for a company called Knowledge Universe, which is the parent company of KinderCare. So that's early childhood education. For about 9 years in their internal audit shop, working on really kind of the SOX side of things. And then 2 years ago, I jumped ship again and now work for a company called Eclipse Senior Living on the senior living side. So different side of the life spectrum, retirement communities, that kind of industry. What I would say, I think, following up on Jen's point from an accounting perspective, what always pops into my head, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. 4 of us attended Gonzaga. All of us were engineers, except for myself. I went the business process route. What I would say about accounting is that it is a technical skill that once learned, you will always have. And so you may use it, you may not use it. Clearly, Jen is in that. Sounds like every day. I am not. I'm on the internal audit side. So I look at accounting at times. It's nice to fall back on that knowledge, but I look at business process. I look at HIPAA compliance. I look at other kind of areas outside of that vast technical knowledge. But I have some of it. And so I think the challenge is you're never going to, it's almost like welding to me. You're never going to unlearn that skill. You're always going to have accounting. You will always know it. You may use it, you may not, but you will always have that technical expertise in that area. So my path has been jumped out of Gonzaga into public accounting, wasn't entirely sure where I was going, used the accounting knowledge to try and see, hey, there's all sorts of system integrations and system implementations and all these other requirements that occur outside of kind of core accounting function. And so to me, it was kind of the into that broader world of compliance. And so what I would say is going down the accounting path, it actually just opens more doors, which can be confusing, which is it doesn't push you into a specific direction. It just means there's more opportunities that will come for you because you will have a technical skill within the business world that few people will have.
Great, thanks, Mark. Eileen Johnston from Microsoft.
Great, thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm really old and I've done a shitload of work, so I'm about to rattle through all of it. Hopefully you'll be a little alarmed, but hopefully it's some goodness. And I graduated from Gonzaga in 1892, just to set the record straight. Look, I started with Arthur Anderson and I got my accounting degree with finance. I'm going to tell you right now, I wouldn't trade it for anything. My accounting degree has been the basis of everything I've done. And I'm going to rattle through what that looked like. I actually hated my auditing class at Gonzaga, and there's a Professor Kay Carnes who could attest to that. I thought it was tedious and boring and silly, and I didn't get it. Yet I went to Arthur Anderson into audit and I learned a ton. I learned the financials of a company. I learned full context of that company. I linked it to strategy and I learned how to run a company. And you just don't get that breadth of experience without having that accounting degree and some of that basic math underneath it. I learned to write in a succinct way. Both my written skills and my verbal communication skills were done succinctly. I learned that by going to work for one of these firms and having the math and the accounting to get down to the numbers and explain things to clients, both in written form and in verbal forms. That's going to lead to a pathway for me later in my career as I move along, but it was critical. And the accounting was the baseline for understanding the business to write and speak in a succinct way. All business execs appreciate it, and we'll look to that as a lever. I had presentations to management and boards at very early stages in my life. I got to see the world very early on in my career, let alone later with Microsoft. I saw New York, London, Paris, San Francisco, LA, Moscow, Hong Kong, Korea, and Stockholm, all within probably the first 5 years of my career, while being housed in the Seattle office. So again, you have that accounting baseline and that fundamental. You're You're worth your weight in gold. You raise your hand for everything. You say yes to stuff. You're going to get experiences. You're going to get opportunities. Don't let barriers get in your way. You push. You know your numbers better than everybody else in business who may know a piece of it. And that's going to open the doors for you to go to different places. I was running Arthur Andersen's cellular industry practice when I left that firm. And so I also got to see an industry from its infancy all the way to a growth pattern at some point. I paused. I went to get my MBA down at Stanford. Hence, I met Microsoft, who recruited me away from Andersen. And I went into the internet space. It was messy. It was, I mean, you guys, this is the ancient 1800 person graduate. It was new. It was messy. It was ugly. It was high risk. And I took it anyway. Take a risk. And again, I felt confident with my math, my accounting, my numbers, my Jesuit education, all of it that gave me the confidence to be able to step into a messy space at a company. When I started at Microsoft, I think there were about 9,000 employees. Today's there's like 130,000. So it was worth the risk. I found myself in Bill's office. Yes, I do mean that Bill. Hundreds of times, which when I interviewed, I said, I never want to meet Bill Gates and I never want to meet Steve Ballmer because I had babies and I didn't want to be like thrown into a hotbed. Turns out I was in Bill's office within like 6 weeks of my job. The space I was in was such a mess and such a risk. He had a high interest in it. Steve Ballmer became one of my bosses. He fired everyone else around me. It's a high risk company, you know, high risk, high reward, held on to me. He knew I knew the numbers. And then he found out I graduated from Gonzaga. So he liked the fact I had that Jesuit tradition. He knew GU's School of Business had a forte in accounting and finance and was thrilled about that. Again, I knew the numbers and that was pivotal. I found myself with a group of 4 birthing Xbox. So you can go back now and really date me because yes, I birthed that puppy. I did the whole business model, the business plan, team of 4 of us put it all together. We were working for Bill. It was his baby. I had that thing losing about 5 billion. 5 billion back then was unheard of inside that company. I created it to be a subscription model, sort of mirroring what I knew from the cell phone industry. I wanted it to be subscription. I had to argue with Bill and Steve and everyone else about that being the right model. You look at live on Xbox now, that's the entire revenue model. It's all about subscription. In fact, several industries have followed subscription. You know, I also acquired Halo, which was a company called Bungie, and Halo became sort of the biggest media thing when that franchise hit its all-time high at its point in time. It was one of my greatest accomplishments, quite frankly, to get that box plus that game to put that thing in the billion of profit money at one point in my life. And again, all of it was from my basics of understanding numbers. Later at Microsoft, I'll move into roles where I'll help create all the data centers that ultimately will become our cloud, when no one knew what cloud meant other than that thing in Seattle that hangs over your head and rains on you every day. I helped move us in Office from an Office regular software thing into an Office 365, which is a subscription-based model today. Again, I have a thing for, if you understand people, they like to pay little bills, not big bills. And sometimes you can fool them a bit with a marketing twist to pay a subscription. Later in my career, I become a division CFO at Microsoft, accountable for about 80 billion. Scary number. Just remove all the zeros. Little tip in accounting. Remove the zeros, make it simple. You could manage a checkbook with $80, right? Okay, it has a BN next to it. And about 75,000 employees that I was responsible for. So a really big job all around the globe. I've had a phenomenal time seeing the world, learning the cultures and learning the whole people side. You'll hear us talk about accounting being a technical skill. Yes, it is. But it opens up your doors. And my favorite part about my career in the last, say, 15 years has been all that I've learned outside of this country, from the cultures and the people and the experiences, and weaving that in, and yet still having my math camp, we call it math camp at Microsoft, knowing my numbers and having my math camp as sort of my baseline has helped me educate, teach, and coach thousands and thousands of employees in that company. And all of that led to me being able to retire early, probably more than a decade ahead of, like 15 years ahead of time. And so technically and logistically, I am retired, which means every single day is a Saturday and I get up and do whatever the hell I please on every day. And I've loved my career, wouldn't take my accounting away from it ever. Enough said.
Awesome. Yes, thank you, Eileen. Excellent. And our last panelist today is Tiana Helm.
Thanks for having me, you guys. Super flattered to be here. Love giving back to my GU community, so this is awesome. That's a tough act to follow. I do not have as much experience. But I do have a unique perspective in the fact that I'm just a few years out of GU, and I was there for my undergrad in accounting, and then stayed for to do the 3-2 program and get my master's in tax. So it wasn't too long since I was in your guys' shoes, and and remember very well what you're going through right now, and maybe some of the decisions. And though I stayed true to the very traditional route of going public. I'm with PricewaterhouseCoopers in our Portland office. I will say that I had every doubt in the book going into my major, into my master's program, was just totally uncertain about it, asked every question I could think of, ran through every scenario, and would not trade it. And I also would say that though it was a traditional route and I'm in public accounting, I'm so thankful that I'm in the Portland office and in a small office, because it allowed me to take accountability for the trajectory that my career has taken in terms of variety. I have gotten the opportunity, all of us in the Portland office are mapped to core accounting, or core tax, but we also get the opportunity to help other offices that are bigger, that don't have as much manpower. And so when I feel like I need something different, or I want to look at a different project, a different type of client, a different industry, all I have to do is raise my hand and ask, and there's somebody who can use our help somewhere. So in the year and a half that I've been with PwC, I'm not sure I've reoccurred on a client necessarily yet. And I've done everything in almost every industry, from super high wealth individuals, private companies, large S corps, large partnerships. I've done brand new clients. I'm even doing a carve out. I've done provision. So I've even seen the audit side of really, really large audit in Nike. I got to be on that this summer for year end. And so in that very short amount of time that I've been there, I've seen everything, and I've had so much control of what I wanted to see. And people have been really responsive to that. And I credit a lot of that to a smaller office that had that flexibility, and people that were willing to invest in my career and what I really wanted to do. So, yeah, I have good variety, but also a perspective that is really close to where you guys are in terms of questioning things and wondering if this was going to lead me to where I really wanted to go, or what kind of variety can I really see. And especially from a tax perspective, I was very skeptical of that. And so I've been pleasantly surprised by that so far in my career. But yeah, short intro for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Tiana. It's funny, I could tell that this is Zoom and not Instagram, because the chat is completely empty and there's no hands raised. If this was Instagram, I'm sure, and I could probably check your Instagram if I could and see that there's been probably multiple entries there. So students, let me know what you want to know. I'll ask a few questions here, and we'll keep things going for sure. But let's get some hands up, and let's put some things on the chat. Thanks, Sam. I'll get to yours in just a second. We do have a number of freshmen and sophomores with us today, and a number of you mentioned these terms, and I wanted to make sure that they understand that. And so public accounting, you all started out in public accounting versus sort of private accounting. Could one of you, and I'm not going to sort of dole this out, you're just going to have to fight for the microphone. Could one of you discuss a little bit what's the difference between the two, maybe how one of them leads to opportunities, or what, and why you chose public accounting in the end for your career choice to start off with?
It's Eileen. I might be the most dated, but just a quick thought in my choice at the time. I wanted the breadth, and little did I know there was going to come depth with it. Today, in my role, or my recent roles at Microsoft, I'll give you the benchmark. My own son graduated in accounting and finance from GU a few years ago, and I would not hire him at Microsoft. I told him to go to the public accounting firms, learn the breadth before you dive into the depth. At Microsoft, we've hired as a company many into finance straight out of school, and they're harder to train. You get caught in a silo. You see a little small pocket, or picture an Excel spreadsheet, and you're getting one cell. You go into public accounting, you're going to get so much breadth and depth. and variety, as Tiana was just sharing with you earlier, that it poises you to do whatever you want in about 4 years. If you don't like it, you can leave, but you're so much more valuable because your experience is unparalleled, just given the context you get, versus you go straight into a company. And some of you can disagree with me, but it's just my experience. You go straight into a company, your experience could be limited. And that may be super interesting to you, and you may be happy and joyful with that. But if you're looking for a career trajectory or moving around, it's more limiting, my view.
This is Jen. I was just going to add, I echo that certainly public accounting isn't the only path, but at least at Zillow, I so value when we're hiring for positions. If someone has that credential, I just know they're going to be very well-rounded. They're going to have a ton of experience. I mean, a lot of what you do in a new job isn't familiar. And so having someone that has the skill set to be able to take something new that might be uncomfortable, but they have a really good framework for how to think about it, I think is just hugely beneficial. The other thing I would say about public accounting, at least from my perspective, when I graduated, I moved from, I guess I was I grew up in Coeur d'Alene, actually. So kind of half lived in Coeur d'Alene, half in Spokane, but moving to Seattle for the first time, I feel like my class that I started with in public accounting, they kind of became my Seattle friend group, and I'm still friends with so many of them. So even though public accounting, yes, it is hard, the hours are long, if you can kind of just dive in and dedicate a very short portion of your life to it, you're going to meet awesome people, you're going to get really great opportunities, and probably make some friends that you'll have for hopefully life.
I'd also add, just from my public accounting experience, that what I've really appreciated most is the career development and just like professional development that you get. You get a chance to they really give you the resources. There are so many resources for you to use to learn how to be a professional. And so even if you're not thinking that it's somewhere you're going to stay for very long, there's so many resources there that the time you spend there, you can so make the most of it. And it's just a really great transition place to go. And even if you decide you want to take a 180 and not even do accounting, I mean, big public firms, they have consulting, and you could even hop over to audit or tax or whatever it was, but there's so many other avenues even within that firm, and just doors to open, people to meet and network with, those are relationships that you keep. And I wouldn't say I'm great at always networking and putting myself out there and continuing relationships, but it's almost impossible not to do at the firm. And it's given me a place to practice doing that. So that's something else I'd plug for public.
And I would just say, echoing clearly what Eileen, Jen, and Tiana have said, is that you are the asset in public accounting. So the reality is you are what the firm is using to try and bill. So to be conceited is they're going to invest a ton of time and energy and effort into you to develop you as a person, because they want to up-level your skills as well. So it's actually a good synergy between what you want in your career, in your early career, and what the firm is willing to invest in you, because they want you to be able to, frankly, to be crass, send you out and develop your skills so you can add more value to the clients. And so it's actually a very good meshing of what I want in my career and what the firm wants me to do, so that we can sell my knowledge and my skills.
Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna continue. Thank you all for your questions as well. So I'm gonna try to get through as many of those as we can. In keeping with sort of the public accounting realm here, we've got a question that says, mainly this is for Tiana, but I think any of you could provide some perspective regarding maybe some doubts you had going into accounting. Is there a way to know that you're quote unquote smart enough to be successful? And does the criteria change at all once you leave academia and begin your career? What do you think?
I would say don't let being smart enough keep you from pursuing it. I mean, I can tell you, I'm not sure if you've gone through any of the recruiting yet, the person asking this question, but the interviews are who are you? Tell me about yourself. It's not, tell me how you did or didn't get a 4.0 or whatever it is. And they're not expecting you to walk onto the job the first day and remember everything that you read in your textbooks at college. I mean, you are smart enough. You're smart enough, and that it's all about experience. And truly what made a difference for me were things like my communication skills, my teamwork, my ability to be flexible and adaptive and to absorb things and to learn things, because you're always going to be learning in this profession. There's going to be things that change. I mean, the tax code changed right as I was kind of finishing up my master's and heading into the profession, and laws and regulations were changing. So that is not the criteria that I would focus on. I would focus on absorbing what you can absorb, figuring out the things that you maybe enjoy, but like learning about yourself in terms of how do you learn best, and then practicing your communication skills and working in teams, because those are the things that will make the difference for you. Is if you understand how best you learn. I start every new client or project or team that I work with. Those are the first questions I ask is, how best do you communicate? What avenue should I use to communicate with you? And then I let them know what my preferred learning style is. I'm very visual. So I share that right up front, and I ask, what are your preferences in terms of communication and things like that. So just set the groundwork, and those make the biggest difference in the world. That starts the project off well, and that's what I leverage the most on any of my work. So that's what I would say.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's see. How was your experience taking early accounting classes in college? Did you struggle? And if so, what did you do? How did you end up being eventually able to stick with it?
I can start with that one. This is Jen again. I would say I did struggle. And I think the reason that I struggled is because until you have the real life context of what you use these debits and credits for, it seems a little bit like this arbitrary puzzle and mystery. But I can assure you that if you kind of just power through the early days of confusion and not understanding, it really does just click all of a sudden. And believe it or not, I was going to add on to Tiana's last response. I think when I was choosing my major in accounting, I think I really thought in my head that, I would just be kind of crunching numbers all day long. And this has obviously changed as I progressed through my career, but really and truly, to give you a very rough estimate, there's so many other skills that I have to use in my job and different aspects of my day than just kind of the basic accounting knowledge. And I'll give you just a really rough estimate. I would guess that 10% of my time today, I truly spend applying those fundamental skills that I learned in the beginning accounting classes. And it's really 90% is solving problems and having meetings with my direct reports, learning about interesting aspects of the business and trying to solve issues through an accounting lens. So there really is there's so much more to it than the kind of fundamental things that you learn when you're in college, that I wouldn't get too stressed if you're feeling like, gosh, these accounting 101 classes just aren't really like sinking in and seeming all that interesting. It really does click, and it really gets more interesting. And it's almost like the building blocks that you can take to do all of the things that a career in accounting can provide.
And how about if you're fairly comfortable with your accounting and you'd like to maybe add a major? Mark, you mentioned that, I think you mentioned that you were MIS. We've got a few questions about maybe marketing, doubling up with accounting and marketing, or doubling up with accounting and finance. Is there any of those combinations that you might think would be particularly beneficial for opportunities in the future in accounting, going forward?
Yeah, so what I would say is my experience was I'm old enough to have predated the 3-2 criteria at Gonzaga. So that wasn't an option back then. But I was a 5-year guy, so I decided to layer on an MIS degree. And what I would say is, of course there is, because I think what you're hearing from all of us is, hey, accounting is great. It's a skill set, it's a knowledge. But I think what you're hearing all us say is that at some point you transition, maybe not out of accounting, but that becomes your core competency. But so much of the work I think we all do is, again, to Jennifer's point, is working with direct reports, problem resolution, conflict resolution, working with other folks. So of course I would say that a broader breadth of knowledge is better. I think what I would say is accounting is going to give you that within the accounting field. So you will see multiple industries, multiple businesses, multiple revenue models. But again, if you can layer some other input onto that, absolutely, why not? Like I said with the welding analogy, I think is accounting is a skill set. It's you will always be the person that has that book smart when it comes to numbers, debits and credits. Accounting is a foreign language in math that few people can really have the competency to get around. So of course it is valuable. Can you layer on other competencies on top of that? 100% would recommend that. But again, accounting is a difficult path to follow in school. It is not, there's a lot of weight to be lifted there. So can you do it? Sure, of course you can. And I would recommend it, but just know that it's not an easy path to be hoeing.
You know, it's Eileen. Sorry, figures the Microsoft person gets disconnected on technology. I'm back. The thing I might add on to that, when I was at Gonzaga, I did triple major, call me sick. So it was accounting, finance, and economics. I just loved economics. So that was sort of a goose egg for myself. Accounting and finance went hand in hand for me, still do. The thing I would tell you, I think in today's world, I'm a big fan of marketing. Like all the business decisions I'm making at Microsoft and all the work I did, I was side by side with our marketing team. And I think marketing is at the forefront of a lot of creativity and things you go do when you're not an engineer per se, but you got to go figure out the business model side of it. Finance and marketing a lot of times are two in a box working on stuff together. I would have given anything in hindsight to say I should have added marketing instead of economics. It would have made me more rounded. More importantly, the thing I probably learned the slowest and was terrible at early in my career was all the people skills. You get taught and you learn, given all the feedback and whatnot, but I would give anything back in my day to have had the proper people skill training so that when I entered, I wasn't just numbers, math, finance, but I had the sensitivity, the empathy, the awareness. You guys are probably better versed at your age bracket, not so much at mine. And so to get the knowledge I got later in my career to become, the manager of 75,000 people and handle all that, it took a lot of what I would call technical work I had to do on the people side to bring that together. So don't underestimate how much your career will actually be working with people. I heard Tiana reference collaboration. Today's society, collaboration is everything. If you wear two hats and you handle people, you're going to love your job a lot more.
And I would also say that I do a bit regret not adding another business major to my time at GU. I got a little bit wrapped up in the having a certain GPA and wanting to really excel at every single class I was in. I was also a student athlete there, and so I just always was kind of feeling like my time management was in a real time crunch. But I think if I had taken a breath and remembered to check in with myself and really dig into the things that I truly enjoyed that were maybe outside of accounting, not that I didn't enjoy my accounting classes, but just some other external things that I might have enjoyed, I think I would have found that I might have wanted to pursue something like marketing or econ also. And that, like you've heard us all say, accounting is such a great layer because it's kind of that top of the business world pyramid, where if you start there, you can do anything underneath. And so if you do have that self-awareness to ask, is there something else that I am kind of interested in? I would say, why not give it a shot and try and layer onto that? Just I mean, if you know more about yourself and, you're just setting yourself up to be a little bit more ahead, to have a little bit more base knowledge going into it. But I also wouldn't say I feel like it's hindered my career path or anything to not have added on to my accounting. I had a Spanish minor, which was awesome, and that was a fun thing for me. But I think if I had maybe stopped and paused and tried to think a little bit about, my overall goal of like maybe wanting to run or own and have my own business, and then tried to tack on, what other pieces of the business school would maybe go well with that. I don't think I would have regretted adding to it.
I'm sorry, before you go on, can I ask another quick question about that? Do any of you guys see any value in a major outside of the business school along with our accounting major? Like my other major is political science, and I find that a lot of times we don't really talk about accounting majors who have a major outside of the business school, but I feel like arts and sciences majors have a lot of, writing and critical thinking that some of the business majors don't include, and I wanted to know if any of you guys see value in that on a resume.
Hey, it's Eileen. I certainly do. I spent so much of my career, I already referenced the people side. So if you get some HR classes in there, it's a home run. But a ton of my career is writing and was writing. And so, I got taught by Arthur Andersen how to write for all intents and purposes. And it took a few years and a lot of pain and a lot of feedback to get that business savvy and succinctness to it. And so those written skills you're going to learn in poli-sci or otherwise by paper drafting, English classes, they're going to go a long way.
Yeah, I second that for sure. This is Jen. I think you would just be shocked the amount of time in public accounting and then wherever you go from there, how much writing you do. And it's formal writing, whether it's, a work paper or a technical memo, but even learning how to communicate well through email and get done what you need to get done by writing a crisp, clear, concise email. I think there's a ton of value there. And admittedly, a lot of people who come out of schools, they can't write an email to save their lives. And so any other major you're considering that helps polish that skill, I think is a huge, huge benefit.
I really want to emphasize the writing point too, just because it was something that stood out for me when I was recruiting, that I could write emails and that I was comfortable communicating that way. But it's also been incredibly helpful just within my teams or extracurriculars that I've decided to get involved in at the firm, whether that's like our Black Inclusion Network or Green Team. And I draft emails that I send out to a larger group of people. If you know how to write those clearly so that the person who's reading it is able to understand well enough to send back what you're asking for, and you don't have to do a back and forth and clarify over and over, it really is a big deal. And same thing, even just with small questions on a day-to-day basis, especially in this virtual environment, just with my seniors or the engagement teams that I'm working with directly all the time, if I can ask the questions and communicate it really clearly in the first try, it's smoother, we save time. So I would really emphasize the writing piece.
One other thing that, Tiana, you just triggered in my brain, I doubt this is a class, and maybe Andrew it is, and you can help bring me into the 21st century, but if somebody could have taught me to prioritize, and I bet everybody's nodding their head that's one of these panelists today. It's a gift to learn how to prioritize. The writing thing is super hard. You're going to learn. It gets easier as you go. But I probably had a reputation for learning how to prioritize. And I would tell you the public accounting firm, Arthur Andersen, taught me how to prioritize. You cannot get everything done that you think you have been asked to do. So if there's a class somehow that teaches you how to prioritize and drop the 20% or aim for the 70, drop the 30, it's a hard thing to do because, like you were saying, Tiana, you want to succeed, you want to be the best kid in school, you want to get the best grades. Don't go 100%. Figure out how to prioritize and just delete the stuff you can't get to. It'll help you in life.
I could speak a little. Oh, go ahead, Mark. Yeah.
I was going to say on that thought as well is we're all accountants here. So at some point, there's a kind of a diversity of thought exercise where in your early career, there's going to be 5 accountants sitting in the room arguing about an accounting question. And so often having that a liberal arts education or some other school of thought in your head might allow you to think outside of the box. And so it just, again, to second what all of our panelists have said is if you can bring some other framework in your head, education or otherwise, to the table, it gets you outside of just, hey, are we really talking debits and credits here? Or maybe there's a broader picture we need to think about, whether it's marketing that Eileen has talked about or what have you. It's really a question of how do I interact with people across the table? Maybe in my early career, I'm just talking to accountants, and then it's going to be about debits and credits. But at some point, you're going to find yourself sitting with marketing people, operations people, IT people, and having the ability to interact with those people and know you're all smart. You're all smart in your professions. And now it becomes down to persuasion, communication. How do we best communicate our challenges across it? I think is a big issue. So if that's another degree, if that's another skill set, what have you, I think it's thinking outside the box and not just being so focused on accounting.
Just to build on that a bit, one of you asked a question probably at the beginning about what if it's too hard and what if I'm not smart enough? All of you need to know that if you graduate from Gonzaga University with an accounting degree out of the School of Business, you got a home run. Have the confidence to know you're going to get a job. You're going to get a great job. That school is renowned in this area. That's going to open your doors. And so just have that confidence in your feet and recognize the value of that Jesuit liberal education. Plus, I've got my accounting as my baseline for bringing diversity of thought to the table. It's a no-brainer. So don't worry about it's going to be too hard. You don't have to have the top grades. You've got it. You're going to get a rich career.
And I would say that I would 100% second that. And what I would say is my career has been an open book test. So smarts matter when someone directly confronts you and says, what's the answer? But those are few and far between. And often with those people skills, you can say, that's a good question. Let me go think about this and do some research. And the world becomes in your career an open book test. So it doesn't have to be, I need an answer right now because I'm on the spot. Sometimes that does occur, but often it is, good question. Let me go do 5 minutes, an hour, 6 hours of research and come back to you with a memo succinctly that says, here's what our response should be. The world is an open book test.
Well, certainly, thanks for that plug, especially Mark and Eileen for our program there. It's almost like we handpicked you guys to be on this panel. So
You paid us.
yeah.
I didn't get my check yet.
My bad.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold your breath, but I want to get to this question because I think this is a great question, and I'm hoping that we can even broaden it a little bit. There are three out of the four of our panelists are women. So, what was your experience like as a woman in the field of accounting? What advice do you have for young women? And was it difficult? I think that last one is really important there. Was it difficult in any way? And I'd also like to sort of expand this to maybe other, if you have knowledge or experiences with other underrepresented groups, maybe that we could talk about that as well. Maybe some initiatives that your firms are doing to help with those.
Boy, I'm oldest, so I go back a couple centuries. It was hard. I stepped into the accounting profession. 0.5%, half of 1% of women were partners at Arthur Andersen. When I left 9 years later, it was less than 1. It was a very hard field to get in as women. And we were at a hiring rate of about 45%. So it was hard to keep them and retain them. And I lived through it. And there are some tricks. We could spend an entire separate call on what I call how to manage the men. It is doable. And you can even trump them. That's doable. I managed Ballmer for over a decade, an impossible man to manage. And so you just have to keep an open mind. The world's evolved a ton. Microsoft was the same way. I called it frat house number 2. I joined frat house number 1, switched, and oh my God, I'm in frat house number 2, and they're a little bit more obnoxious. But there's a whole bunch of tricks to the trade as to, how to navigate through that. And I think the world's moved much further along. I'm going to let the other women chat because, it's gotten a lot better in both fields.
Yeah, I definitely think, people like you, Eileen, thank you for making it an awesome time to be a woman in accounting.
Just one cute thing. You can't see me completely, but I was actually 6'2" and 200 pounds when I graduated. I'm 5'1" and maybe 100 today.
Love it. No, I was just going to say, I feel so lucky to be a woman in business and a woman in accounting right now. The opportunities are endless. I am fortunate if I have a 2-year-old. I probably had her a little bit later than the average person, but I wouldn't take any of it back. And I would even say, as a female, when I was pregnant, I almost had more opportunities come my way during that period of time. It's really funny how the world works. I basically got promoted while I was pregnant and then promoted again while I was on maternity leave. So I just feel like the world has come so far and the opportunity is so great that we're really in a really great spot as women.
Yes, I echo that it is so much better and I'm thankful. And to be completely honest, I actually never let that be a thought in my head as to it being an obstacle when I entered really any profession that I thought about pursuing. And I would say that it rang true even in public accounting and even in a small office. They were very diverse in terms of male to females. And I guess what I would say though for young women that I would make really clear is don't be afraid to set boundaries. And really it's for anyone new, especially in this virtual environment. You have to set boundaries and you have to not be afraid to do that really from day one. As much as you want to say yes, and if you have that energy and capacity and want to say yes to everything, that's great. But you also need to be able to say, at some point, I'm shutting off my computer, and at some point, I let you know that I have vacation planned for this time, and this is important, and this is a hard boundary. And if client work gets pushed to that time, we might need to figure something else out. And being willing to do those things, but to also just say, hey, this is important to me in my life. This is what makes me a happy person on a day-to-day basis. This is what's going to make me a better employee for you. And so can we find another way to make this work so that this is a hard line? And I do think that sometimes possibly I felt intimidated to do that with coaches that I had that weren't female. So if I had a male coach, that oftentimes felt a little bit trickier, but in the end, that's what they want to know that. And I think that you can kind of set yourself apart, and there's other ways to work around it. And it's not saying that you're going to work less or less hard, but just to be willing to let people know that, they can't really take advantage of you in all of those ways is really healthy. And I think the sooner that you can practice that and try doing that, the better. The one area that I did feel a bit clumsy in was that I'm one of the only people of color in our office, Black specifically, because it's so small and we don't have a lot of diversity in our office. But I didn't feel like it really harmed anything, but I was thankful because I felt like I'd earned my place at the table where I don't think I would have if I had gone a different path. A lot of the people of color in our office, if they're there, they go down a little bit of a different recruiting route. And they use an internship program that starts earlier and your sophomore usually starts your freshman year. And it's kind of extended. And there can be a little bit of tension with that, sometimes feeling like you're the token person in the office. And I know that I did occasionally have a little bit of those doubts in myself when I was kind of having a tough a tough week or something like that, or struggling to learn new technology and things like that. And I was kind of looking around and feeling a little bit like I was lost and not, qualified. And that's when I started to doubt myself. And you get some comments in the office about the lack of diversity and like, we're so glad to have tea in the office, and things like that would kind of start to sink in. And so I think that's actually where I really leaned heavily on my GU education and my background, and was just like, as all of our panelists have said, I graduated from a really great university and I got a really good education, and that's all. Really, that's the story, and that's why I'm there, and that's why I'm here, and yeah. So I've had a little bit of it, but really setting boundaries and just trusting your education and having a little bit of self-awareness to kind of battle through some of those things.
Yeah, if I could just build on, I think it's both a work-life balance, and as women, we've had children. I had children. I raised them while I worked. It is a challenge, and having those boundaries was an excellent point. And proactively managing your manager to understand your life so they have some empathy and appreciate how you balance that out. It's also inclusion. And when I was referencing working with the men, you really have to find a way to have the confidence to say, I'm entitled, if you will, or I'm obligated to be included in this conversation or to be a part of this. Just because I'm a woman, don't give me the administrative task. Let me be a part of the business solution. And just finding ways, respectful ways to still insert and allow others to fold you in. I still think that's a challenge in any sort of diverse pool of people, but in my career in coaching a lot of women, I spent a ton of time coaching women to get the confidence to insert in order to be included in the right table conversations.
And I actually have a great example that I almost forgot of that exact thing, Eileen. And I'm the associate, so I was the lowest man in the totem pole on this engagement team, and everyone and the senior and director and manager above me were all male. And so I was on this team, and there was an incident in the office where all of them were in one of our side meeting rooms, all having a meeting, and another female in the office turned to me and she goes, "Oh, do you know what they're all in that room for?" She's like, that looks like your engagement team. Like, are you missing a meeting or something? And I was like, oh, that is really curious. I wonder why they're all in there. That is my team. And I went to look at their calendar and saw that they did have a meeting scheduled with our client, and usually they bring me in on all of those things and allow me to be there to at least watch, even if I'm not contributing much, to watch and observe and learn. And the senior had forgotten to add me to it. And so I actually just took my notepad and pen and I just walked into the room while they were on the call, and I just sat down and I was like, yep, they forgot, but I'm not going to let it slide because I want to be there to learn. So I think that's another point of setting boundaries and just being bold and confident.
I also think, fortunately, this is a big focus for large companies, and they're really focused on diversity and inclusion initiatives. Zillow, I think, is a really great example of that. We, in our hiring practices, we've instituted some really good kind of thought-provoking processes where before we can make an offer for an open position at a certain level, we have to ensure we've also interviewed a person in an underrepresented group. And we've already made really great progress on the hiring front. We were kind of one of the first companies to join what's called the Board Challenge. I think, one of the places where diversity is not even close to excellent is board of director groups, typically, who are setting the tone at these companies. And we actually just hired our first Black female board member. And I think a lot of other companies will follow suit. And when there is more diversity, I think everyone will just feel better being in that environment and won't feel isolated.
Yes, well, thank you. Yeah, we all know that how important this topic is, and I think Eileen's suggestion of having a separate Monday at noon, another one of these just to deal with these issues is really important and really something that should certainly happen. So look out for that as well. We have a few more minutes left, and we do have a number of questions about technology. So I think in particular, we've talked about people skills, we've talked about communication skills. How about some of the more hard technological skills, some software, some things in that regard that you see now? Technology is always going to be changing, so I think that's going to be part of the lesson here as well. But if there's anything in particular that you think is really important right now, that if students have an opportunity to become proficient in, if you could identify that.
I'll give a very quick Microsoft plug. Anything you can do to become proficient in Excel will take you very far. So I think, it's hard to know what companies you go to work for, what particular software they're going to be using, and they run, there's so many different options out there, but Anyone with extraordinary Excel skills, you will be very much valued by whomever hires you.
And I guess that coming from Microsoft, I'll just echo the same thing. I wouldn't worry about your technical skills. I think that's what, Jen was also saying. You're going to get taught how to use the apps and the tools once you get to the company, because, a bunch of companies have their own unique stuff. A lot of companies use SAP. Don't worry about it. You'll get taught when you get there if you need to. Again, if you can use Excel, you're in heaven, especially if you can figure out how to dump it into a PowerPoint and make your points succinct so your written communication skills are right in there with it. Home run. So I wouldn't worry about the technical side. Your company's going to teach you. If you can get an edge, put it on your resume ahead of time. That's great. PowerPoint, Excel. I'm just going to preach Microsoft because that's, my God shit, but anything we make, learn it.
Well, and I would just add, to me, it really comes down to concepts, which is what Jennifer and Eileen have said, is really when you look at, from my perspective, from an internal audit perspective, it's really, how does this process work? So when I was in the firms, it was, well, is this company SAP? Is this, more recently, my current company's on Dynamics? So it's really a function of, what are these concepts? How should the data flow? So it's not so much of knowing the system itself, because the firms will teach you that. It's really, how do we want the data to flow, and what are our hangups, and how should it get there? And it's really these kind of broader strokes. The knowledge will come based on the firm you work for, or the client you're auditing, or the company you go to work for. This is the tool we use. But again, those broader strokes about, what is the process? What is our data flow? How do we visualize that data? What is the reporting we use? Do we use Excel? Do we use Tableau? What are the tools we use? BI, whatever it is. All of those are tools that your company, frankly, will have selected for you. And so to spend your time in college learning those tools is probably not the right use of your time. It's probably understanding how data moves through systems.
And Mark, one sentence that I just want to share that you just triggered is, all of you are at a Jesuit university. And the Jesuits' goal with all of us was to teach us to think. So when you get in these roles, no matter what app you're handed to do, please step back and think, because even at Microsoft, some of the shoes have holes in them and the software is broken, and you don't just go along with it. You sit back, think, call it out, make it better. And oh, by the way, Dynamics is another Microsoft product for anybody wondering. So
it is. And what I would say is, look, I've got employees that work for me that are getting their Microsoft certifications in specific tools. So that will come. I wouldn't waste your time. Sorry, waste is too strong of a word. I wouldn't spend your time at a liberal arts Jesuit university working on a specific technology. What I would say is, go take that marketing class, go take that religion class, go take that philosophy class, broaden your horizons, understand personal dynamics, understand how to work through issues with teams, and then the technology will come.
And that's true with any other school. Any kids you're competing against looking for jobs, that's not going to give them an edge if they've done that. Heads up.
Well, we have about 3 minutes, so maybe 45 seconds each. I like this to finish off with this soft question. What do you love the most about your job, and what's been a challenge?
It's Eileen. I shared this at the beginning. What I think I love the most, and unexpectedly, was learning the cultures of 100 different countries, the people, the uniqueness, and just the variety of cultures, which was very humbling for me. I'll just say we're all, my words, sort of arrogant Americans. And it was wonderful to see that we aren't the center of the universe on all things. And I learned a ton from every country that we operate in, and the employees in those countries that taught me about their cultures that help make us a better company. And I love that to the ends of the earth. Probably my biggest challenge, and Tiana, I think you referenced it earlier, was time management. Just learning to prioritize my time, spend it wisely, and yet still eat dinner with my family every night.
Mine is, it's the same thing for both, actually. I love the people that I get to work with. It's the best part of my job by far. If I didn't work with such great people, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But I will say, on the flip side, that can be hard sometimes too. I think the people problems, or the accounting problems, aren't the hard problems. It's when you have a personnel issue that you're trying to work through. That's what makes a hard day for me.
I would say that I love that I can take ownership of what I get to do, and that I have that I work with people who care about me and care about my career development, and making that happen. And it may not happen right away, but they care about it enough to help me continue to pursue whatever it is that I want to pursue and to do different things if that's what I want to do. So having that ownership of the experiences that I want to have, I think that's perfect for me, and I love that about it. And my greatest challenge would definitely be setting boundaries in the beginning, because I'm definitely a say yes person and want to do as much as I can, and show people that I'm willing to work really hard and work as many hours and get it done. But I learned quickly that that didn't make me super happy if I was spending all of my time doing that, and that ultimately didn't make me a better part of the team. So setting those boundaries was tricky in the beginning, but now that I've done it, it's easy and it made a big difference. So.
Well, I would just say every morning I wake up and look at my emails, and they are incredibly humbling and humiliating because I don't know much. I'm an expert. What I would say, I'm a generalist in a lot of things, but I don't know much about PCI, HIPAA. I know a few things about SOX. And so part of this is, hey, that is what's exciting to me about my job, is that I get to be a generalist in all these different areas. And yet I'm really a master of none of them. And so it's understanding that, hey, I don't know this right now, but I can help you solve problems. So let's solve problems together. And just knowing, I think you've seen all the panelists say, hey, look, we all have this core competency. That's where our knowledge comes from. We're confident people. And then you have the ability to have problems thrown at you every day or every week, and then try to resolve those problems. And what are they? I don't know. I could show you my email inbox right now. There's going to be problems all the time, but it's really just coming back to, I'm a graduate of Gonzaga. I'm proud of my education. I'm proud of my accounting degree. And I think that allows me the opportunity to expand beyond accounting and solve problems.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much. If we could all get a round of applause for our panelists today, whether you want to do that electronically or just physically. But thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your insight and your wisdom with us today. It's been an incredibly wonderful hour of information, and I know we'll follow up on some of these topics as we go forward, and hopefully we'll have some more information for the students sometime in the future. But thank you all again very much.
Thanks.